going to do his list of accomplishments. What I want to talk about this morning is how he impacted my life. Dad was best known on Cliff Island for being married to Sally Dyer, and they would have celebrated their 63rd anniversary in July. So Mom really sort of exemplifies for me what a faithful wife is all about. Dad is also known on the island for being the island bagpiper. Most of you remember him marching around our front yard next to Paul's house. And so many people over the years would say to me, "Oh, I heard your dad on the other side of the island," or "I heard your dad when I was boating." And Don and I grew up listening to that. Sometimes we didn't love it, but most of the time we did. Dad, and I appreciate you playing Amazing Grace. Dad actually played that at my wedding. He piped me down the aisle and played that. So anyway, so I'm going to just sort of talk about what Dad meant in my life. He was an accomplished piper, and Dad was accomplished at most things he tried. He rarely failed at anything. But I don't want to list his accomplishments. I just want to tell you how he impacted me as a person. He was successful at most things, but he also had some great challenges in his life. And most of Dad's challenges were relational. Our relationship was definitely one of those challenges for him and for me. We struggled much. But through those challenges, I learned so much. In my view, I didn't have a whole bunch of bright spots with my dad over the years, and that was my perspective, and I'm sure that was jaded, but God really worked in those dark spots and the bright spots. About 10 years ago, God woke me up in the morning and told me to write my dad a letter, and I was just overwhelmed because I had no idea what I was going to write. He told me to tell my father how my father had been a reflection of God to me. And I didn't know how I was going to do that because I didn't have a lot of bright spots. So I sat there with my pen for about an hour, mad as a bee, thinking, how am I going to do this? What am I going to say? Bright spots with my dad didn't come easy for me. But after about an hour, I sat there praying, and God told me what to say. So I started to write, and I wrote a letter about a time years before in my life when I was frightened and lost and 15 and pregnant. I got pregnant at 15, and my parents didn't find out until I was 7 months along. And during those last few months of my pregnancy, my dad was just amazing to me. He was my defender. He was a wonderful guide, loving, patient, just an incredible person to me. He showed me the character of God. And I didn't meet God until 22 years later. But he showed me just how wonderful and loving and kind and gracious God is. He walked with me through a critical time for me and my baby. He supported me ferociously through making agonizing decisions. And I wrote that letter and I gave it to him. And for a while, I sent it to him. And for a while, I almost don't think he knew what to do with that letter. He kind of looked at it and wasn't really sure what I was saying, but it was clear that he needed to know, to me, how wonderful he had been to me during that time. It was a huge bright spot in our relationship. After that time, I surrendered my baby for adoption. I don't know who knows that and who doesn't. I'm very open about it. But I surrendered a little girl for adoption. And my dad and my mom walked through that with me. My dad used to kind of joke around when we would go out in public and my belly was out here, and he'd say, if anybody says anything, Heath, I'm going to get them. I'm going to say something. I am not going to let them say anything to you. So he was just that guy. So after I surrendered my daughter for adoption, my dad and I kind of reverted back to some real challenging times. And our relationship was difficult again for a lot of years. And again, it was, I'm sure, partly my perspective. I know it was, but it was also, I was an independent person. Dad raised me to be independent. He's the reason I was independent. And so most of my adult life, as my family can attest, my dad and I were struggling. And then about 4 years ago, Dad was diagnosed with dementia. And for whatever reason, and I'll never know this side of heaven, what the reason was, he chose me to be the guy, girl, lady, who walked alongside him. And he just loved me and cared for me in that time that I was caring for him. It was a really hard time and it was a really dark time, but it was a really special time for me. I got to know him in ways that I had never known him. He was soft and kind, and it was just an honor, incredible honor, to be that person in his life. And like I said, I would never have said it would have been me, but it was. So I wanted to just share briefly that we all lost loved ones. You know, we're all here to honor loved ones. And we have great memories, and they had gifts and talents, but they're also hard times. And God uses those hard times too. He uses those things in people's lives that aren't so great and aren't so special. He uses it all. And I just wanted to share, I've heard it said that the darkest nights have the brightest stars. And I know this is true. My dad impacted me and others in many ways. He taught me much, and some of these lessons were for sure lessons that I wouldn't have chosen for myself. But they were lessons I needed all the same. He wasn't perfect, none of us are, but God uses the whole of a person to make an impact on others, not just the bright, pretty parts. The dark spots in someone else's life make the bright parts shine brighter. Growth happens in the dark and in the light. In the New Testament, John 1:5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot extinguish it." And James 1:17 says, "Every gift God freely gives us is good and perfect, streaming down from the Father of lights, who shines from the heavens with no hidden shadow or darkness, and is never subject to change." I appreciate y'all bearing with me, and thank you so much for this day and what you've done.